role as well as the Director of Philanthropy and Engagement.
Awesome. I'm Rhonda Palmersheim. I am the Associate Vice President for Alumni and Constituent Relations at Concordia in St. Paul. So Sarah and I work together. Concordia St. Paul is a great place.
You already went.
I went.
Good morning, I'm Carla Leitzman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am brand new to Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. So this is the end of week 3, and it's been great. So happy to be with you all.
My name is Nathan Lundgren. I am also brand new and 3 weeks in. Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service. Carla and I had the same start date. Up until recently, I was the stewardship manager at Lutheran Social Service of Minnesota.
Amy Wyatt. I am not affiliated with anything. I am career switching from education to nonprofit development. So just trying to learn as much as possible. So send me all your knowledge. Any advice, I welcome. Thank you.
I'm Baron Leopold, and I am with the ELCA Foundation, and I live in Faribault, and I serve the Southeastern Minnesota Synod and in congregations and members of those congregations.
Sure. I'm Brenda Moore, and I've had my own consulting practice for about 10 years now, and have been doing this development work since I left college 49 years ago. And Aldi has been like my life's longest relationship. My people are Aldi people. And we need to talk because my daughter's taking her driving test in Faribault this afternoon. And I want to know all the, it was the best we could do.
Okay, so pass.
Hi everyone, my name is Jana Swenson, and I am a consultant with Corus and Associates, and we help churches and nonprofits realize their mission and ministry through resource development.
I'm Josh Driver. I'm the Executive Director at the Hospitality Center, which we welcome international students with the love of Jesus to Twin Cities, offering lots of programs and events, connecting them to the local church and volunteers, asking for commitments to engage them in relationship for the most impact. I've been there 4 months, or ED for 4 months only, but there for 8+ years.
Morning, everybody. My name is Mike Nevergall. I'm a gift planner at Gustavus Adolphus College down in St. Peter. But I'm based here out of my home in South Minneapolis. I've been at Gustavus about 5.5 years now. I've been an Aldi member for about 12 years. I can't believe it's been that long. And really grateful to be here today.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in an awkward place here. I just preached last Sunday in a church in the Roen.
Was it Edina?
House of Prayer. Okay. But I am Melissa Malna Gonzalez. I'm a pastor and mission developer, and I started Tapestry, an ELCA congregation in Richfield. It's bilingual, Spanish and English. Everything we do is in both languages, and I guess kind of just we say we share the love of Jesus through food, music, and education, and we build bridges and provide opportunities for people to cross them. So we do the revolutionary work and the daily work of people getting to know each other who are different from themselves and building those kinds of relationships. So this is my first time here, and I do probably different kinds of fundraising, if you want to say, than most of you.
I'm Dave Larseth late, not the late Dave Larseth. I had a hard time getting in the building, so that was anyway. I'm in my last and final career of life. After I retired as Director for Global Mission Support for the ELCA for 12 years, God led me into a new calling, which is the creation of an organization called Friends of Madagascar Mission, orientated towards evangelism and humanitarian cares and concerns in one of the poorest nations in the world, one of the oldest Lutheran missions in the world, but an exciting and a fun place to be. And I'm the founder, the president, and the executive director, and we're a unique organization because we don't pay anybody anything to work for us, and we have a full staff of 5 people and a couple more people coming on to staff. But we're here because I'm grandfathered into Aldi. When you serve long enough, this is the prize you get. And I'm happy to be here because Aldi's also been a part of my whole career when I was at the ELCA and even now. So good to be here.
We met Dan. Do you want to say any more, Dan?
Yeah, hi. I'm Dan Ruth. I'm the Executive Director here at Lutheran Partners in Global Ministry. I'm the tech person for today. For those of you on Zoom, we have a very small webcam on a very small tripod, so I'm trying not to make you all motion sick by moving it around too much. But it's really wonderful to be here. And I used to work with Dave at Lutheran World Relief before coming here to LPGM, so it's good to see old faces again.
I'm Frances Roen. I'm the founder of Fundraising Soul, and my purpose and mission is to nourish the heart and soul of fundraising professionals and their organizations through my work. And Brenda was actually one of my earliest mentors in fundraising, so it's super excited to be reconnected after like 12 years to be decided. So yeah, so very glad to be here.
Wonderful. Chris?
Oh, is it my turn? Okay. Christopher Kind, Director of Development at Bethany Lutheran College. I've been in this role for 15 years and a member of Aldi for almost that long. When I started at Aldi, I met Brenda Moore, and she was my mentor, and we've been friends since once you meet Brenda, you can't ever leave. So that's a good
Great. And Dave, would you say hello and then we'll come back to you?
Sure, Dave Fuerst. I am the Associate Vice President for Global Relationships and Resources at Lutheran World Relief and Corus International. Sorry I can't be with you all today. I'll say more a little bit about that in a little bit. And Brenda Moore is still my mentor.
John?
Yeah.
No.
I'm sure, yeah. So I'm John Helson. I'm Associate Director of Aldi. And I'm sitting in a Catholic school right now where I also work. So I'm just trying to bridge some of those ecumenical connections. So, yeah.
And Lori.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lori Brill, Executive Director of Aldi. I am in Asheville, North Carolina, and great to see all of you, hear all about your backgrounds and your journeys. And I think that it's pretty clear for those of you who are new to Aldi that this is really an extraordinary group of fundraising professionals who care deeply about each other and care deeply about each other's work. I'll share just a couple of stories. When I first became acquainted with Aldi was in 2015, when Rich Duncan called me and said, you know, you work with our Lutheran colleges and universities, you should be at this meeting. And it's only an hour from where you live. And so I was interested and intrigued, but wasn't quite sure what that would mean in terms of being an exhibitor, but really enjoyed having a chance to connect with folks at that first meeting. It was very clear that there was a different environment, a different culture than at a typical conference. And in some ways, I felt like a little bit of an outsider, which I was. But I was very quickly welcomed and in that experience. And I'll share also that as I began my journey with Aldi as executive director in January of 2019, I had no idea COVID was on the horizon. I had no idea I would be applying for PPP loans, knew nothing about that process. Most of us didn't. But I'll reflect upon and just share a couple thoughts. First of all, I reached out to Brenda, which this is a pretty significant thread today, that Brenda Moore has had a great impact on many of us. But when I really did not know what to do because our conference was going to be canceled, it was our primary revenue generator. We really did not have a plan, and Brenda helped me move into a strategic choices process. And that was so helpful and so beneficial because it helped us target in and hone in on those things that were most important and figure out how we could build out from there in a positive way. I'll share a story briefly about Roger Dow. Served on the board. As soon as he went off the board, he signed up to be on a committee. Last week, as we were planning our meeting in Myrtle Beach for our site visit to the conference, Roger called and said, "Hey, I'm going to be down there for donor visits. Do you need my help?" I said, "Absolutely." So he'll be there with the Blue Ridge chapter and connecting and engaging with them as well. Terry Egan lives in Myrtle Beach, where we'll be hosting our conference. He became a member of ALDI back in the 90s. He served on the board. He's willing to step up as hospitality chair, which we're thrilled about. So I think those stories just reflect what ALDI members do, which is they jump in, they're willing to get their hands dirty, they enjoy working together, and it's just an incredible network of amazing volunteers. So it's more than friendships, it's more than connections, it's more than relationships. It's also about inspiration, it's about collaboration, it is about supporting one another. And I think the recent priority of the board, which Dave introduced himself, but Dave Fuerst is also our board chair. Mike Nevergall is our incoming board chair. Brenda Moore serves on our executive committee of the board. And I would say that their priority as a board has certainly circled around expanding the network. So as we think about how we move forward in today's challenges with demographic issues that we're all looking at and facing and trying to tackle, that we've looked carefully about what makes the most sense in expanding the network. So we have gone through a pretty rigid and very thoughtful process of looking at a name change for the organization. And we in fact have a ballot out to our membership to cast their votes so that we will know what our name will be, whether that remains ALDI or turns into the new name, which will be the Association for Christian Fundraising. We'll share more about that once we have wrapped up that final date for those ballots to be submitted. So we have had great response and look forward to sharing more with you. My last comment is just that I invite you to join us in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for our annual conference, which is Faith and Fundraising 2023. For those of you who are not members, we are extending those new to ALDI, the member rate. And so if you do go online and just take a look at our rates posted for registration with all the details that John has clearly communicated in our on our website, you'll see that you'll be able to register at the member rate. So we welcome you. We invite you to participate in what is really an amazing experience and gives you 3 to 4 days on the beach in South Carolina, where it will be very warm in February. So thank you for letting us, I feel like I'm creeping in on your meeting, but I wish I was there. So welcome everyone, thank you.
Lori, you're welcome to stay as long as you like. It doesn't feel creepy at all. So let's thank Lori and get fired up for Myrtle Beach. All right. Awesome. All right. We're going to launch into our presentations, and if anybody needs notepads and pens, I've got them. Just raise your hand. Let me know. Some pen and paper for you. Anybody? Yeah. All right. All right, we're good.
Like I hired you.
I love the big idea. Yes, the inventor of the wheel. So, all right. The theme for today just popped in my head, but it was really originally inspired by some presentations I was at Aldi earlier this year in Milwaukee, and particularly Corus International Lutheran World Relief talking about this big goal they had. If I remember right, it was they want 75,000 new donors. Now I don't remember like a timeline or what anything like that, but it's like that's a big number. How do you do that? And I heard some of the nuts and bolts around that, but I also thought, what the heck? Like how do you bring that kind of change to an organization? Say we're just going to think so much bigger than we did, and set a goal so much higher than we have, and how as an organization do we work together as human beings who have different styles and different opinions and make that happen. And so I reached out to Dave as a person who has some of the background on that, and I thought would be willing to share with us. And so hopefully you've read Dave's bio in the invitation, but I just also want to say I don't know him super well, but I found him to be a deeply thoughtful and kind person, and just so knowledgeable in what he has to share with us. So I will turn it over to Dave, and then when we get to Frances, I'll give another little intro for her as well. So if you're ready, Dave,
I'm ready, Gay. Thank you. Thank you very much for those kind words. And before I dive in, man, I wish I could be with you all. That was the plan. And my spouse came home from a work trip with COVID yesterday, and so I wanted to spare you the risk. And so that's why I'm doing this remotely. And special thanks to Dan and Bethany, Lutheran Partners in Global Mission. I love that video. What an inspiring story and an important mission. So I think we all should sign up before we're done today. So, Gay, I really want to thank you for inviting me to consider this idea of the big idea. It forced me to just take a brief step back and think through our last several years at Lutheran World Relief and Corus International, and think about what has been important. And I don't know if you all are like me, but when somebody says, what's the big idea? My mind first goes to things like, oh, I wonder what we could do with connected TV, or I wonder how we could use AI, or what's fundraising going to look like in the metaverse? That is exciting. And we do one or two of those things at Lutheran World Relief and Corus. But they aren't the really big, most important things. And I guess my message here today is sometimes the big ideas are the ideas that we all know. So today I'm just going to tell our story. And some of it was planned, some of it wasn't. And when we get into question and answers, we can go into depth on that. But I identified 3 areas that I felt were critical to our journey at Lutheran World Relief over the last 3 years. Let me go to get my slides to work. 1 second. Well, there we go. So the first 2 I'm going to mention, but I'm not going to spend as much time on them. There'll be themes as we go through. The first was we had to get our message right. We spent a lot of time focusing on our message. And the second thing that's happened over the last few years is we've made significant investments in fundraising. We've made investments in the team. We've made investments in things like our direct response program across the board. And those are investments that have been critical and continue. And both of these things have been important. But the most important thing for us as I zoom back is the culture. It's kind of interesting. A year ago, one of our trusted advisors, partners, called me up and said, Dave, we would like you and a couple people from your team to come present to some of our other clients about how to build a fundraising culture. And I was like, honored to be asked. And then I went back to the team and said, hey, guess what? We got this exciting invitation to go talk about how to build a fundraising culture. And everybody looked at me and said, why us? And I said, that's a really great question. The reality is some of this just happened as nature came along with the nature of the problems that we were trying to solve at the time. And as I look in the rearview mirror, the last 3 years, it's been critical. I wish I could say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, a group of us sat in a room and said, what we really need to do around here is focus on building a good fundraising culture in our organization. We didn't do that, but that is one of the things that I think has happened. It's not perfect. We have our days, we have our debates, but there are some things that are undergirding us as a team right now that have been really, really important. So I'm going to start with the beginning of the journey. For us at LWR, we had been on a fairly steady as you go incremental growth plan. Hadn't had a down year in almost 10 years. And Lutheran World Relief at around this FY18, around the end of this curve, to bring some additional context, was in the middle of a merger with an organization called IMA World Health that has created this family of organizations we now know as Corus International, of which Lutheran World Relief is now one. So that was going on. And as I look at it now, I think, back then we were just dealing with garden variety, economic injustice, and humanitarian crises. We had no idea what was in front of us. We had no idea what was in front of us. A pandemic, a war, all the supply chain issues we're dealing with now, polarization, that has really amped up the problems that we needed to solve, and we hit a down year. And at the time, right before all that, we hit a down year. And at the time, I remember thinking, this is the absolute worst time to have a dip. Now I look at it and I say, I think of it as the most important time to have had a dip, because it forced us to really think through what was important. That was our burning platform, if you will. So before I go on, I'm going to take you right away to our big idea. But I want to give you 30 seconds, really quick, on a piece of paper. I want you to write down two things. One, what problem do you solve or does your organization solve? What's your problem? The second is, what is your goal? Whatever you're responsible for. If you're a major gift officer, it could be the goal for your portfolio in the next year. If you're leading a program, it could be bigger than that. If you're a consultant, it could be something that's happening that you want to see happen with your clients so they can do their job better, whatever that goal is. So write down the problem and your goal really quick. Everybody got it? All right, as you're finishing up, we're going to come back to that at the end. So here is our big idea. Are you ready for it? A little bit of a drum roll. Feel the anticipation. Isn't that exciting? Well, what in the world does 2x5y mean? Are we in math class again? At our burning platform moment, we made the decision that we were going to double our revenue in 5 years. Not just because it's a great thing to achieve, but the work that our organization was undertaking, providing a holistic answer to the problems of poverty in the world, required it. It required no less than that kind of a goal. And so that was our starting point. And it started small. It started among leadership. But it quickly became a team goal, something that we all were working on together. So we felt good about that, you know, and you need something to feel good about in a down year. We're going to double our revenue, you know, and sometimes people looked at us like we were insane, you know. We said we're going to acquire 75,000 new donors. People are like, "Are you crazy?" And maybe we were, but that is what exactly was required of us in that moment. So the first thing we did is we said, you know what, if we're going to do this, we have to be clear on the problem that we are solving as an organization. That's why our donors are even talking to us. They, you know, they might like the idea of Lutheran World Relief, might be the most loyal Lutherans in the world, but they're not coming to us just because they go to a Lutheran church. They're coming to us because they're trying to solve a problem. So what is that problem? And so we got the entire organization in the same room for a week, and we worked on it. And the first couple of days we're hammering away. What's the problem? What's the problem? And at one point during that week, there were 95 problems up on the wall.
How symbolic.
That was a problem. And it also was an important team moment, not just for the fundraising team, but for the program team, for the finance team, all of us sitting down and working on that together. And we landed in an incredibly simple place. The problem that Lutheran World Relief is solving is that there are enough resources in the world right now to solve the poverty problem. Right now, even with a down economy and stressed supply chains, there's enough resources to solve that problem. But in a world that has all the resources it needs, the people who have the least are bearing the brunt of the burden. And we got to figure out a way to get resources from people who have them to people who don't. That is exactly why anybody signs up to be a supporter of Lutheran World Relief at all. Is I am thankful to God for everything God has blessed me with. And I have a responsibility. I am inspired to share God's love by sharing out of my abundance. Simplicity. That was a big moment for us. And that's something that brought us all together. So message is good, message is fine, and it's words on paper, but you have to do something with it, right? And so our next area of focus became, if we're going to double our revenue in 5 years, we need a strategy. And we looked and analyzed that dip. Why did it happen? Where were some of the gaps that we had that, caused that dip? And we understood it and developed a plan from there. And again, the fundraising team sat in a room and toiled over that. And we looked at every channel, we looked at every segment, we looked at it all. Where can we grow the resources that are going to be needed to fulfill the needs that Lutheran World Relief needs to address in the world? And there was tons of Post-its. There was a multi-page strategy. This is the kind of stuff I love. I love multi-page things. I love complex things, and it is also kind of a weakness at times. So we also needed to boil our fundraising strategy down to a simple point. And this is what we came to. This is it. Our fundraising department, if we do these 3 things, we've done our job. And when we looked at our fundraising strategy, everything that was in it fit in there somehow. And you want to know what's amazing? Is we stole this from somebody else. So it wasn't a lot of great original thought, but somebody came along right in the middle of it and said, you know what? Here's what you all are about. You need to recruit new donors. You need to show them the love, and you need to ask them to give a legacy gift. That's it. And so one of the things that binds our fundraising team together, especially in this remote kind of environment, is we all understand these 3 things, and we all know our role within it. And that has been critical for us. I think the other thing that has bound our culture together over the last few years is we've had to remain agile, and we didn't see the pandemic coming. This last year, we did not see a war in Ukraine coming. And of course, none of us know what is going to happen in not only the US economy, but the global economy, and how is that going to affect the work that all of us do? It's going to. And so we've had to be agile. If I were to leave leave you all with a word of encouragement today, I would say, you know what? Don't read all the articles about the economy and the depressed effect that that's going to have. Philanthropy. In fact, I would maybe go so far as to say, we find the authors of those articles and block them from your feed. Research shows that at times of recession, at times of economic crisis, people with resources step up. And we saw that happen with the pandemic. We're seeing that happen with the war in Ukraine, and it will continue to happen because we as human beings have a need to help our neighbor. And that is what it's all about. So this is where we landed. This is where we're kind of at today. I don't have, we just closed our last fiscal year, and I don't have that on here, but the bottom line is we're on target. We just ended year 3. You know, I had at one point, I think we had some hopes that maybe it could be 2x 4y. You know, I'm not so sure. It's achievable, but it's a stretch. It's a stretch. And the important thing about a chart like this is this is numbers on a page. This is really not the exciting stuff. What's the exciting stuff is all the people that make up that line, the thousands of donors who are a part of that. That is the critical part. And so I would invite you to look down at your sheet of paper, the problem that you solve, and what is your goal? And ask the question, A, is that a problem I believe in? I'm guessing the answer to that question is yes. If it's not, different conversation. Second is, do you really believe in that goal? Are you really confident that you can achieve that? My guess is the answer is yes. I hope the answer is yes. But if it's not, find a way to get there as soon as possible. Sometimes lack of confidence is absence of a plan. That's it. And so anyway, thank you for inviting me to do this. And I wish I was with you.
We have a few minutes for some dialogue, some Q&A. What kinds of questions do you have for Dave? Brenda.
Dave, we all know that the number of Lutherans in the world isn't growing in our country, certainly growing in other countries. But tell us a little bit about the new sources for those donors that you're acquiring. How have you gotten beyond the kind of the Lutheran world and out into the rest of the world who has discovered that they love the work that you're doing?
That's a great question. And the first thing that I would say is, yep, the number of Lutherans is shrinking, you know, in any, you know, given year. Right now, donors to Lutheran World Relief is, you know, 50 to 60,000. If I add that together with everybody who donates to ELCA World Hunger, LCMS World Relief and Human Care, Lutheran Partners in Global Mission, and on down the line, it's not enough. So there's opportunity there. And I think that's something that we take on very seriously. We've got some work to do in inspiring more Lutherans to be involved in solving these problems. And so there remains opportunity there. The unique proposition that Corus International or the unique opportunity that Corus International gives us is we actually have donors that are giving to several different organizations. So we have an impact investment organization that's a part of the Corus family called Ground Up Investing. We have a global health organization that's called Corus World Health. And for us, that's been a very unique opportunity to bring different donors of different backgrounds together under the umbrella of Corus International. So not only does Corus International bring these different kinds of organizations together to provide a holistic solution to global poverty, it also gives us the opportunity to attract people who might not identify with the word Lutheran or be inspired by that. And that said, there's still opportunity in the Lutheran market. And I say Lutherans, I know not everybody in the room is probably coming from a Lutheran background, but mainline denominations are all seeing the same dynamic play out. So I think, we've taken it our first responsibility as making sure we're doing our job there, and then looking at where are areas that where are people who might identify with some of these other organizations that are part of the Corus family.
Other questions, Mike?
Hey, Dave, it's Mike. I love the simplicity of the 3 steps that you showed us. And I'm struck by the asking them to give a legacy gift piece. We all know that we should be making more asks for legacy gifts, for planned gifts. Those maybe I'm assuming planned giving in that is not actually your implication. I'm curious to know more from a perspective of a frontline gift officer. How has that changed the way that conversations are happening with donors? Are you actually leading with that in conversations with donors such that it's reshaping the way that those conversations happen?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And I feel like we're still in our infancy on this one. This is a major percentage of our revenue every year. Last year, I'm guessing it was 15%, between 10 and 15%. So it's significant. And I think those legacy gifts have come in because of the other parts of our strategy that have worked well and how people have emotionally connected with us. We're not quite there yet. We're getting there. We really built a legacy program from ground zero, starting 3 years ago, and brought in this is one of the things that COVID allowed you to think outside the box on. We brought in a guy to lead the program who was very successful in leading a legacy program in the UK. And if you look at that market in the UK, you see legacy giving all over the place. I mean, there's as many, connected TV ads and mailers out there on leaving a legacy gift as there are becoming a monthly sustainer, if you will. And so we're not there yet. And there's a lot of people in the room there today that, we can continue to learn from. And that is one of the things that keeps, our plan a bit aspirational. So.
Thank you, Dave. So interesting. And I am sorry you can't be in the room with us because I know we would continue this conversation over lunch. But I do have to ask, is Casey sitting right there so she's your live audience or?
No. I got a confession. She's got COVID and so I am the only one in this office today. And so that's why I'm in the office.
That makes sense. Yeah, good.
Anyway.
Well, give her our best, please.
I will. Yeah.
We do all wish her a speedy recovery. Yeah.
Thank you.
And please stay with us as long as you
I will.
like. Well,
yep. I will stay on.
I don't know if this will work or not, but
we're gonna do it.
I got a show.
No,
No, is this gonna work or not? If I go up too close? Nice and close.
Oh, here we go.
Can you see that, Dave? Or not?
Kind of. Oh, the quilts. Yeah.
Quilts. This is my congregation this last Sunday, and all the quilts that they are giving to Lutheran World Relief that they have spread out. So I just had to show them that quick. But that's an
thanks,
example
Aaron.
of something tangible that my congregation loves to do. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in our big time of year on that right now. A lot of quilt blessing services happening.
Awesome. Well, okay, thanks. Our deepest thanks again. And I'm going to segue over now to our next speaker. So I got Dave on board to share with us, and then I started to do some networking, because I wanted to have this be multi-perspective presentation to just meet different people where they are in different organizations. And so I reached out to someone in my network who, this wasn't quite her focus, and she's her name is Annie Stanek, and she focuses more on working with corporations on their philanthropy, which might be a really cool future topic for us. But she suggested Frances Roen to me, who I did not know, and I called her and she picked up the phone and we had a great conversation. And I just thought what she's doing, and I checked, read up on her background and the website. I thought this is amazing, because while we've got Dave here and our organization's going like, we have these incredible goals and we've got to get there and you're all going to work so hard to do that. Meanwhile, there's burnout. There's employee attrition. There's, just a lot of turnover, a lot of stress in the workplace. Just everything that we need to achieve. Like, let's all just take a collective deep breath. And here's Frances saying, you need to take care of yourselves if you're going to be able to accomplish these big goals. So I'm really, really eager to hear what you have to say, Frances, and share anything else about yourself as well. I shared a bio with her, and we're brand new friends. So so please come and share with us, and you're welcome if you're comfortable to sit on the
trying to figure out what's
stool.
the best way to do this.
Yeah.
What do you have?
Forwards up, yes.
There we go.
Deep breath. Well, hi, everybody. It's so fun to reconnect with a few folks, and I knew Melissa too when I walked in. So, but before we get started, I would just love everyone to take a deep breath. So we're all going to do it together. So humor me a little bit. So we're going to breathe in, we're going to hold it, and we're going to breathe out. So sit up nice and tall. And just, if you want to close your eyes, that's fine too. Hold it. Hold it one more time. Okay. Thanks for doing that. It's a nice way to recenter ourselves. And so often in our work, because it is so busy, we realize sometimes that we are holding our breath. We don't take time to pause and breathe and reflect. So today we are going to be talking, should I switch these slides?
If you would like.
How do I do that on yours?
It should just be the arrow. Or let's see.
Or not?
We need to switch Dave off of
There we go.
Dave's photo op.
I can hide Dave.
Hi, Dave. Bye, Dave. There we go. So today we're going to be talking about aligning your values with your practice and how that can make a difference not only for you personally, but also for your organization and the success of your fundraising program. So this is going to be a real personal time as opposed to thinking kind of the big organization wide fundraising in the beginning. We'll get there, I promise. And I think actually this will be a really nice kind of dovetail and complement to what David talked about, because he mentioned in the very beginning about building a culture. and also about the pandemic. And I think for most of us, the pandemic has really forced us to think about our values, right? What we value, how that shows up in the work we're doing, how that shows up in our everyday lives. So that's where we're going today. And thank you for having me to talk about this. I appreciate it. So I'm Frances. I'm Frances Roen. I'm from Fundraising Soul. I founded Fundraising Soul in 2018, so pre-pandemic, after fundraising for about 15 years in various nonprofits, one which was a Lutheran organization, Augustana Care Corporation, and that's where I met Brenda back in 2008. So our goal is to make fundraising the bright spot in your day. And we do that by really focusing on the health and wellness of the individuals we're working with, and building a plan from there for fundraising. So we do absolutely do all the typical fundraising consulting things, but we always come at it from the lens of wellness. We believe it's essential to your fundraising program that you are healthy and well. So I want this to be a conversation together. I'm glad everyone has paper because I'm going to have you writing some things down. But I want to start off with a question that we ask all of our clients in our very first meeting, which is, how does fundraising feel right now? And I got to be honest, a lot of times we get some negative emotions that come up for people. But if they're positive ones, I want to hear those too. So you can jot them down, or if anybody wants to share how fundraising is feeling for you right now, love to hear it.
Well, I'll start because I'm brand new to fundraising, only 4 months in.
Okay.
And I'm the only advancement development person on staff. So we're going to hire someone hopefully. But so it feels very challenging. Like I can't dream big, almost like it's almost too big to come in. We're pretty small, and yet extremely exciting to try to get people with me. So it's like this blend every day of a high and a low simultaneous.
Yeah.
And I think because of the newness, I think it's an appropriate season, one that I'm embracing rather than trying to escape, but still how, is kind of, and then just kind of attacking it. That's kind of how I feel right now.
There's that energy and anticipation and anxiety too. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else want to share how it feels? Yeah.
I'm not affiliated with anyone, but as a person that has attended fundraisers, it's the season right now. I feel like I've been to a few. So many amazing missions that you can support, and I get really excited about it. And then I look at my email in the morning and I just feel bombarded. And I was like, I don't want to be that person bombarding. So it's, again, a high and a low. It's like, oh my gosh, there's so many things I would love to support. However, there's the flip side of oh my gosh, delete, and I don't want to be that person. What am I doing? So
I love that you share that from a donor perspective, because I think
that's my knowledge right
now. Absolutely. Our donors are feeling very excited and wanting to contribute, and then sometimes there probably is that feeling of overwhelm, maybe even just from the communication.
I think in the state of our economy right now, I'm like, I wish I could do more. However, groceries are up, and a house with 3 boys, and
lots of milk. Absolutely. And I think, is it Amy? Amy. And I think, Amy, as fundraisers, if you move into that profession, there's so much as fundraisers we can be doing. We're always thinking about, I should be doing this or this, and the task list is endless. So there's that sense of excitement, but also overwhelm on the flip side. So thanks for sharing. Yes.
I think, not only are kind of what I call the brass tacks of fundraising difficult right now, where, you hear so much, well, I want to help, but I'm going to wait until, the market cools down a little bit, or, inflation is so high, those are kind of, again, those day-to-day, I don't want to say basics because they're bigger than basics, but, kind of that baseline, I guess. But also, you mentioned the pandemic and really causing the societal shift to reevaluate what do we value, like you said, but there's also this desire to, how do we be authentic in what we do? How do we not exploit the people that we're trying to serve? How do we tell those stories authentically and kindly to who we are? And again, not going away from this savior mentality. So it's this duality of how do we do these things?
Absolutely. Maybe this will shed a little light on that.
Yeah, I hope so.
So, yes.
What we've tried to do is have our donors tell others how they feel about our organization. And we give 100% of every dollar given away. We don't take anything for administration. And so that's a big goal with a lot of people from my experience in fundraising, where a lot of donors complain about how much money is spent on the project and how much goes, for other costs. And we have a high rate of people who volunteer how they feel. I just had an email yesterday from a woman who said, I want to give monthly because I believe in your values and I believe in how you're accountable to the donors.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'm feeling really pretty good.
Good.
And our organization has grown through the pandemic and not gone backwards. And I think because of expressing our values and then feeding it back to the people through our publications.
You could just do this presentation, I think. Just a second. Okay, thank you for sharing. If you didn't share, if you want to write that down to capture it, that's great. All right, so we have how fundraising feels right now. It can feel good. Feels good. We're kind of living our values. It feels overwhelming. It feels exciting. It's sort of unknown. There's some challenges. How do you want it to feel?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in your mind, how do you want fundraising to feel when you're doing it? What do you want it to feel like? Can you give it an adjective? Describe? Joyful?
Authentic.
Authentic?
Inspired or inspiring.
Inspiring, okay.
Yeah, in relation to that, I think it's kind of exhilarating to get that buy-in and to be the person that brought your organization to that point.
Love that. Love that word. Thank you for sharing.
For Tapestry, our real ministry is just sharing the gospel with people. And I'd like people to be able to see, other Lutherans, to be able to see that as something, and with people who are invisible in our church for the most part. But if I say we're sharing the gospel, that doesn't, for some reason, connect with Lutherans. And if I say we're sharing food, or if I say I need clothes, I'll have a stack of clothes like you wouldn't believe. So I want it to feel like we do share food. That is a big part of our ministry, but a lot of people share food. So what makes us different and unique is that we're actually sharing within our community, but the gospel is always really the foundation of everything we do. So I would like it to feel like I don't have to say I'm sharing food, so can you or we're teaching classes, so it just which is all part of our ministry, but it's not really the core of our ministry. And I'm probably kind of have this pipe dream about it, but I would, and maybe it's part of messaging or whatever you want to say, but I would like it to feel like, as Christians, the gospel is the core of our mission, and that sharing the gospel with people who are not in even kind of in our whole thinking as an organization, except for out there, the people out there that we can help or something. I would like it to feel like people understand that it's an equity issue, and it's about sharing the gospel, and it's about being the body of Christ, and that we are broken as the body of Christ, and how do we build each other as the body of Christ, as people who are all equal in Christ. And so part of that is just letting go of that kind of, that's just not going to happen right now. But I would really like it to feel like it's not always having to convince people that the ministry is essential as part of the body of Christ.
Yeah, to resonate with people, and not that it's like pulling teeth. And I heard a lot of good words in there, the equity and inclusivity, and those words are going to show up a little bit later too. So hang on to those. They're good ones. So sometimes when fundraising feels one way in the moment, but we know we want it to feel a different way, what that can mean is that there's some misalignment somewhere, right, with something that's happening. And a lot of times the misalignment, not always, but sometimes it's that our values aren't lining up with our practice in some way. So we're going to talk a little bit about core values, and this isn't like a core values assessment. I want to be clear. There are those online. If you really want to get into this, there's a lot of information out there. But so we're just going to do like a real quick one together. But core values are really a tangible representation of your purpose. So they're your personal qualities. They define how you respond to problems and challenges, how you treat other people, how you see yourself, how you see your community, how you interact with others. It's really your relationship with the world around you. I'm going to put some core values up here. Again, these are not all of them. There are lists of hundreds of these things. Oh, I'm not. I'm going to do this first. Okay, so you can see these things happening in the world around us. Like you've read the news lately. You've seen how the founder of Patagonia, gave away the profits in his company to fight climate change. So you put them in a trust, right? So those profits can be used for climate change issues. But if we think about him and his personal core value, which was love of environment, sustainability, and how that showed up in his everyday life and his business practices, that's a good example of alignment, right? Those two things were aligned, his value and the way he lives his life and practice. I mean, while we are not all this gentleman here, we certainly can still take from that and do this in our own work and apply it to fundraising. So that's what we are going to do. Now, I'm going to show you core values, I think. Nope, I'm not. I'm not. Wow, I need to get this out. See, it's not. Okay. So, here we go. So, okay. So yes, we are all like him. And this is actually a study. So this came from the pandemic about people returning to work. And it's the majority of working individuals want to align their purpose with their work. And this actually came out, you've seen all the things about the Great Resignation and people leaving and looking for new jobs or starting their own thing or just not working and trying to figure it out for a little while. It's all about purpose, right? I mean, this is what's really coming out, is that people are wanting to align what they're doing in their daily life. And I feel like I'm sitting in a room of people who get that, and how they're living out their own purpose with the work they're doing. And that's, I think, why a lot of people probably start in nonprofit work or make a career transition too. Now, the core values. Okay, so here are, roughly 20, a little bit less core values. There are, like I said, hundreds. I just put some up here. So what I'd appreciate is if everyone would take a moment to read these and write down one that resonates with you. I fully recognize that if you actually did the test and had 5 core values, it might not be any of these. So if you want to take a true assessment, or you already know your core values, but if you don't know, maybe pick one of these and jot it down. Anyone want to share what theirs is? I was a former teacher, so sorry.
Mine was loyalty.
Loyalty, okay.
Yep. And then when I think about my job and what I do in my career, it really does all funnel back to the loyalty I have for the company, the loyalty I have to our alumni, to our donors and friends, to my family, to my faith. So it just, that word really jumped out at me among all the others.
So thanks.
Community.
That's
Community. I thought that might be one that showed up for you, Melissa. Okay. Anybody else?
I did community, kind of bonded with gratitude, because I think those two work really well together.
Great. All right. Well, hold on to what you have. Thanks for sharing it for those that did. So now, before I flip to this next slide, I want you to think of something in your practice, fundraising practice, or if you're an ED, right, whatever it is that you do in the realm of fundraising. So it could be annual giving, right, just sort of broadly. Think of something annual giving or major gifts or communications or whatever it might be. So think of like a specific thing that you're doing in fundraising. Now, flip to the next slide. All right. So write that down, write the thing down. You've got your core value. And answer this question. How well does that core value, like if you wrote down community and then you wrote down events, right? How well is your core value of community showing up in the work of events? And give it a rating of 1 to 5. So 5 would be like shows up all the time in everything we do. 1 would be like, it's really not showing up at all if I think about it. And then 2, 3, and 4, somewhere in the middle. You can even do like a little line, dotted on the line.
You're talking about in general in our practice, not in our fundraising.
It could, yeah, if you don't feel like this is, it could be in general in your practice too, if that makes more sense.
But your question is more focused on your fundraising.
On fundraising,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. Does anyone want to share theirs, so their value, their thing, and sort of where it fell? I know, be brave. Oh, sorry, one of my values is courage, so I can fully recognize that.
Yeah. I actually listed empathy as one of my top core values, and then the word that I use to describe what I do is coaching. And in order to coach well, I think you have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of the person you're coaching, in order to have integrity. And so I gave myself a 5, but in practice it's probably a 4, but in terms of how I think about it, it's a 5.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Empathy and coaching is important. Anybody else have one that they're open to putting up there?
I chose stewardship as my activity, and as a newer person, like that's a really nice way to just make the rounds, is to thank people. And so how does community show up in my stewardship? So I'm just getting started, but I'm going to say I'm doing like a 3 to 4, but I think this could help me going forward using that lens as I approach those conversations and thinking how to weave my value of community into those conversations about appreciation and stewardship.
Yeah. Get one?
Well, using the English language, what we're talking about seems to be more adjectives than nouns, in terms of what we actually do. And I think basically of what we do in the terms of evangelism, which doesn't mean just sharing the gospel, it means also feeding people. Because where I work in Madagascar, they don't make a differentiation like we do in the Western world of Christianity, where now I'm doing the gospel, now I'm feeding people.
Yeah.
They look at it in a movement called Physahasana movement, which ties them together in a holistic way. So a different culture. But so I look at it that way. What we do, everything relates to evangelism. And if it doesn't relate to that, we don't do it. And so, the other adjectives, of which are courage and integrity and all those things, are a part. But the key thing is, what is the essence of who we are? And our fundraising centers on that, and that blooms very well for us.
Yeah. So I told you could do this presentation. I'm going to come sit down, and you're going to come up here, and you're going to teach us. You're going to teach me. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Just how I look at the question.
Yeah. And I love that. Thank you for sharing about how in different countries they don't separate those two things. That's very interesting too.
Like we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll share what mine was when I did this and sort of how this all came about. This idea of this presentation is one of my values I mentioned was courage. And when I thought about one thing I did in my fundraising practice, which was conversations with donors, specifically major donors, I realized that that value wasn't really showing up the way I thought it should. And I was feeling, so at the time I was feeling kind of like uninspired and kind of yucky about fundraising, like just something was off. And what I realized was we weren't really having courageous conversations with our donors. We were everything was really glossy, everything was really good. We weren't having challenging conversations about issues of race or equity or any of those things. And for me, that was this realization that some of my practice wasn't aligning with some of my values, and that's what was making me feel not so great, not so inspired, that things were kind of stressful because there was a misalignment. So that's sort of my own personal story. And so I'm glad for many of you, it seems like what you're doing is lining up with core values, because that's where you want to get it to. But I think sometimes if there's even like a component of fundraising that we're like, oh, I just don't feel really good about that, it's important to stop and reflect back and think about like, well, are those values, and you have more than one, right? But like, are my values, my 4 or 5, whatever you come to, are they showing up in that? And could that be what the issue is, right? So are the values I hold dear aligning with my practice? Oh, nope. Yep. There we go. Okay. So I asked you guys to put it sort of on an arrow. So like, Jana. So Jana, you said, I have a slide over here now, that coaching was your empathy, and you were somewhere here, right? 4 or 5, and someone else said, what's sure that's 3.5, somewhere in here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So put your arrow and your little dot, how your core values are aligning with whatever it was that you had in mind, component of your practice or your practice as a whole. And then I want you to think about how you can move it down that continuum. Like if it isn't at a 5, or if it isn't at least where you want it to be, how can you move it? So sometimes it's a small tweak, right? That you have the capacity and the power to do, right? You don't need to go to anyone to talk about it. It's a change you could come into the office and make tomorrow. So like, could I have, braver, more courageous donor conversations? Like, sure, I could. Do I have the capacity? I do have the capacity to do it myself. I did want to get some buy-in from other people on our leadership team, but there were some changes that I could make. Another client we worked with, their core value was like transparency and honesty. And so they could make some tweaks in their communication and language and things that they were writing and sharing to move that down the continuum. When I think about, now I'm in the back with your beautiful glasses on, Carla, and you talked about like ethical, right, storytelling, and how do you not exploit the people that you are serving. So are there some tweaks that you can make and things you're doing yourself, right, to move that closer if it's not already aligned? I'm not saying it isn't, it's just aligned. So then you have things that maybe a slightly bigger undertaking. Like what I'm thinking of, it's not something I can do tomorrow, but it's something that could happen in a couple of weeks' time if we make some changes. Maybe you can move it down to 3. It can be done, but it's going to take like multiple people or some resources to get it to that place. Like this is assuming you're starting at a 1. And then you have, I can move it a little. I need some buy-in and resources from people to really make that happen. Or hey, this may not be possible to change right now. That's okay too. That's a reality. Sometimes that is what it is when we sit down and we really work through these. So think about that for a second and maybe jot down, if you want to get that thing to a 5 and you're at a 4, a 3.5, what's going to move it? Is it something that you have the power to do? Something that's going to take a little more elbow grease, a little more willpower? And jot that down. And I'm going to ask if somebody has one they want to share. We'd love to hear. Yeah.
Well, so my mission critical job is cultivating donors. If I don't do it, no one else is going to do it in our mission. We won't have a mission without the margin. And so a lot of what I can do is this 5, the small tweak, but then what we're going to do, what we've decided to do in the staff, my team actually said this. So don't bother hiring an office administrator to take off all these projects. Hire what you really need. And I need someone with me doing fundraising. So we're gonna, basically it's the number 3, it can be done, but I'm gonna need help because 4 executive directors ago, she's pretty much an advocate for us still. She said you could only, in her opinion, you could only cultivate 100 donors yourself. You can only do personal relationship. And so I'm just starting with that number. And I'm like, we have way more than that. So my solution is to hire a almost full-time person together. We can employ grace and humor because we've never had this dynamic ever, and a lot of learning, but to tackle. So for me, it's a combination of 3 and 5.
And do you mind sharing what was your value that you?
Oh, cultivating relationships.
Okay, relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So to move it along, recognizing that you may need some assistance to do that, right? To make that feel good and feel not stressful and overwhelming as possible. Good. Anybody else have one?
Francis, your story resonated with me. My core values are integrity and influence. And I feel like I'm in alignment with the values of my organization, but I find myself sometimes challenged that I'm not in alignment with the core values of the people with whom I'm meeting, right? Our alums sometimes, picture an institution that was what it was 25 years ago when they were students, not what it is today. And I sometimes find challenge in balancing being a representative of the institution, right, and speaking on behalf of the institution, and not alienating relationships, but also gently nudging people forward to say, this may not be the organization that you think it is, right? So I'm probably in the 3, right? Is having the courage to have those conversations, but also feeling that I have the backing of my supervisors and my team to challenge things that might be out of alignment.
Yeah, we're going to get to a slide in just a couple of seconds that I think may be helpful to this issue that you're talking about, kind of that disconnect, right, between, in your case, donors and yourself in this conversation.
And that's where my thought, exactly, Michael, I'm sitting over here kind of struggling between, this is my core value of loyalty. Is that in alignment with my organization? And if I try to tweak all of these things to meet my core value, what if that's not the core value of my alumni, right? And how do I try to make the best of my core value and align that with the work I do and the institution I work for, knowing that it might not match the people that we're working with.
Yeah, great question. We're gonna talk about that disconnect in just a second. Yeah. So hang on to that. Don't have an answer for you yet. All right. So again, this is a really condensed kind of version of what we're doing. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the value of aligning your benefit of aligning your values with your practice for yourself. We know that, right? It makes us, it feels good. It feels better. It feels more joyful. All those things, right? How does it feel? But also the benefit to your fundraising program overall. So this is like, we know this, right? People who find meaning in their work are generally happier, they're more productive, they're more motivated, they tend to stay at their jobs longer. Okay, so the benefit, right, of when your values align with your practice for your organization is, this is like teamwork, right? Your compassion, your empathy for others, right? Your understanding of what their core values are and how to work together, that all increases. Your productivity goes up, so your strategies are more effective. So studies after studies, I think right now it's, the most recent one I saw is like 12 to 15%, depending on which one you read, about if you have meaning in your work, your productivity, if you feel like you do, goes up 12 to 15%, right? So you're going to be more effective at work because it's value aligned. And then tend to stay at their jobs long. So like fundraising attrition, right? This is a real thing. And when development professionals or EDs and leadership turnover, right? The longevity of those relationships, something is always lost in that, right? So when you start building those donor relationships and all of a sudden they're gone, no one fills that spot for a while, like the history or the communication with donors is lost. So there's a lot of benefit to, I think, for us also begin thinking about how we have value-based practice in fundraising and what that means not only for ourselves as individuals, but also for the health of our organization too. So let's talk a little bit about some of that kind of disconnect. This is a real question, right? So what if there's a disconnect? What if there's a disconnect between your values and your organizational values? What if there's a disconnect between your values and a teammate's values, or your values and a donor's values? It happens, and that's okay. So when you're talking about values, none of the values are bad, right? So like the values that your donor has are also amazing values. The values that your organization, if they have stated what their values are probably amazing values and really important to the mission and the work of that organization, or your teammates are going to have different values. So let's talk about what are some kind of practical tips and advice if there is a disconnect to build some alignment. So first and foremost, live your values, right? Be confident in your own personal values because that's modeling, right? Living your values. And ultimately, you want everyone in your team to be living their values. If it's courage, if it's integrity, if it's honesty, if it's, respect, autonomy, whatever it is, right? We all should be living our values and making decisions based on those because it's not going to be a bad decision, right? You're not going to make a bad decision if it's truly rooted in and based in your values. Try to influence change. So change happens when people speak up and advocate about it. So has your organization had a conversation a long time about what its values are? Is that something you could bring up and talk about, or say, hey, courage is having these courageous conversations or having these honest conversations with donors is really important to me. I'd love to just have some discussion about that. Can we talk about like what that could look like? So it's one thing to live your values, but we need to be having conversations with others about like, hey, this is important to me. How might this show up in the work we're doing? Because it's really likely that it's probably important to someone else on your team. And honestly, it probably is important in this case to your donors. Like, even if at first they don't want to hear it, they really do, probably, is my guess, in a gentle and loving way. And then be patient and focused, right? Change takes time. So if you find that something in your fundraising practice or organization isn't aligning with your values and you feel really strongly about moving it down that continuum, you might not be able to move it down to a 5. You maybe get it to a 2 or a 3. And that makes it feel good, right? It feels good, or maybe it doesn't feel good enough. Then you have a decision to make. But just because tomorrow this doesn't all change, or tomorrow you can't yet have the conversation you want or build the community that you're hopeful for, doesn't mean that it won't. So this idea of being patient and focused, having conversation about it with others, just I think the more we talk about this, the better this gets for everyone, the healthier we become as individuals and as an organization. And then do those assessments, like really live your values, figure out what they are, and not just in your practice at work, but in your practices at home, right? How you engage with your family and your loved ones and friends as well. Probably didn't answer all your questions, but I'm going to give you something. So I would love to answer your questions if you have any. Again, this is just meant to be kind of thought-provoking. And maybe it provided some answers for you or some things to take back with you, or maybe it just made you more anxious because now you have more to think about. Oh my gosh, I didn't know we were going to be talking about this today. But I'd love to answer your questions about this or about general fundraising questions. Brenda?
So for those of us who are CFRE, Certified Fundraising Executive, we sign a code of ethics that says that we work on behalf of the donor. Obviously, we also get paid by our employer. But as Mike alluded to, good news, we live in a very pluralistic society. We all don't think alike.
Yeah.
And most of us work in organizations where our donors don't all think alike.
Absolutely.
And we say we sign a code of ethics that says we work on behalf of the donor, which means we work on behalf of the donor's values as well, or we help the donor express their values and their great joy through their gift. And so I really am, I would argue that it's not necessarily our job to try to change our donors' values, but that it actually is our job to work on behalf of our donor. So how do we live better into that conflict? Oh, what, I shouldn't call it conflict. It can feel like a conflict. It's tension, right? And I'm just curious how, what you all would say about the different ways that you have dealt with that. Yeah. How we live into that. And, you know, I can offer something just really as mundane as an organization having gift acceptance policies so that you're not in a situation where you actually have to accept a gift from a donor whose values may be incredibly skewed, right? But do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to open that up
alignment
too.
sometimes is not, I would argue, it might not always be the goal.
Yeah, so I think that, first of all, you can have conversations and positive relationships with people who have different values. Because again, none of the values are negative, right? Right? They're all good. They all bring something to the table. So I like to think of it sometimes as not that you're like a parent to your donors, but like my values are not the same as my son's or my husband's, right? But I still parent with my values, right? Having empathy and respect for my child and my husband. And so I think coming to the table in that conversation with your donors, and you can even have a conversation with your donors about values, right? You should be, right? What do you value, right? Personally, what do you value about our work? What do you value about our organization, right? And yes, lead with that. And it doesn't mean that you're like, you know, like sidelining your own values, right? And you could share also like, here's what I value too, right? So
looking for the values that connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're looking to align whatever value they have that might connect.
Yeah.
They might not fire on all cylinders with all of our organization's values, but they
Right.
might really align with one.
Right, right. And that then oftentimes that moves the needle for you too, because you're living your values in the conversation and communication with your donor, right? You can hold both. There's room for both, right? It's not an either or.
I do think though that those of us that are blessed/cursed with the value of integrity are going to struggle
more. Amen.
Absolutely, because we're just more aware of the tension between the two. It's more uncomfortable.
Just to bed with you at night.
Yes, exactly.
You can't leave it at the office.
Integrity when you're being healthy is honesty and transparency and those kinds of things, and when you're being unhealthy is I'm right, you're wrong. I think so. I would push back a little bit, Brenda, on what you said. I'm really taken by the conversations that are happening in our sector around community-centric fundraising.
Yeah.
And what I think is a challenge is I'm not sure. So it's set up as sort of this false binary, right, of community-centric versus donor-centric. We're having interesting conversations in our organization about what about the middle ground being mission-centric. And so while I'm a CFRE, I've signed that bill of ethics as well. But I think the challenge is that historically our sector has been based around this idea of donor-centric fundraising and sort of leaning towards the donor's values. That creates some room for some really icky stuff to happen too, right? And what we should be trying to encourage is focus on our mission. How do we come into partnership and into alignment to achieve our mission, even if my values and your values and the organization's values might all be different, might all be different from one another.
Thank you for mentioning that, because you really have named probably one of the most contemporary current issues in our sector. Is questioning this donor-centric thing, which is full of really important ideas and premises and principles, but how it shows up in today's context is part of the dilemma.
Yeah.
And I think part of that too is as an organization, having clear definition of what what's our mission, what are our shared collective values, because I think when you don't have that clarity, that's when it gets really hard where you try to be too many things to too many people. And I think we've all probably heard the stories of of hearing about someone gave a big gift to this institution and then the donor or the family says, but wait a minute, you told me that my gift would be used for X. It's not being used for X. I want it back. When that gift probably shouldn't have been accepted in the first place because the infrastructure to, whatever X is, wasn't there in the first place, but they wanted the gift, so they said it could happen, and so, and I think all of these things, I'm also, I came from Gustavus, Mike and I have had lots of discussion about what community-centric fundraising is, but I think, and it's also on the us as organizations, okay, what can we accept, what do we value, what do we want to do, so that you don't get into kind of that bait and switching, icky gray area that is rife with potential.
Yeah. I'm not a certified anything really, so just listening to the conversation and kind of how it affects a ministry that's really community-based and largely people of color, with a female pastor, that's really marginalized in so many different ways. So I would just like to encourage those of you who are, doing all this work with especially big donors, is to challenge them, because who are the big donors are the ones who have their funds and power because of our history. And if we're not really sitting down as the people who are coming with integrity and with all of the values that we have and with our faith and power, because all of you, and even me in this room, we have some kind of power in this very white room, and probably with our very white donor funding base. So I think it's incumbent upon us to be able to challenge I think you understand more what I'm saying that I'm able to say right in this moment, but so that you're talking about your courage and talking about equity, and because I go out there all the time, and Dan's heard me a few times, and I told him, like, I can say things really pretty and I can just kind of lay it out there, and it sort of at the end of the day doesn't seem to matter really, as far as, because I end up having to raise, I don't know, $50,000 or $60,000 a year or something like that, which is half my budget from people who may or may not. I mean, I'm with congregations who ostensibly have the same values as I do in some way or another, but they don't really, not when it comes to really understanding. And so it's a community, I don't know what the community-centric fundraising is. I have to find out more about what that is, but how we empower the communities that have some kind of voice in all of this, and so I guess just kind of looking at how we can be more courageous and how we can help in all of that to build. I mean, the Lutheran Church in particular, and Protestant churches, whatever, mainline churches, we're shrinking partly because we don't reach out to people of color. I mean, our pure demographics show us that. And so, so I just encourage that those conversations, those hard conversations, with integrity, and I, like, one of the things I have to work on very, very much is is to be patient and focused. And in some ways, like, some people who are marginalized, there's just not patience there anymore, because the patience has been there for centuries. And so, so I understand patience too, but also them pushing, and at some point patience will be gone. And I think that's happening more and more. And so I think that needs to be a part of any fundraising strategies and things like that are happening.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure more to talk about at lunch. Seems like this could be a good conversation. I just wanted to share this with all of you before we leave. Okay. We are doing a retreat in February, a Wealth Rice retreat up in Bayfield. You can find more information on our website. Discount, you can type in the code.
Insider.
Our focus, well, it is fundraising, and like I said, we do fundraising consulting, but we come at it from a lens of wellness. So this is not a fundraising specific retreat. I think if you want fundraising specific workshops, there are a million out there that are incredible and a lot of conferences. This is a time to stop and pause and reflect as fundraisers and nonprofit leaders, to receive, to be replenished, to take care of yourself. And like I said, there's more information on our website. So I'd invite you all to join us. Registration closes in December, but if you register before October 31st, you can use that discount. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you so much. I hope you all found that as inspiring, stimulating, and energizing as I did. It gave me some really great things to think about going forward. So I think we are ready to transition to lunch. Shortly I'm going to ask Dan to give a table blessing before we all sort of head that way. So there, housekeeping stuff, there are restrooms immediately to the left. And then you're going to want to hop on the elevator, go up to the 3rd floor, and then all the way down to the end of the hall where lunch is waiting. And then don't forget to mingle and find your hymn partner and sing, share a little bit about that. And don't forget I'll bring the candy corn upstairs so we can keep the game going while we go upstairs. Anything else for housekeeping?
For those of you who are staying for lunch, we didn't get any dietary special needs, but we have pizza, pasta, and salad. We have vegetarian options for pizza, and we also have a gluten-free pizza, which is a smaller sized pizza. The pasta is not gluten-free, but it is my favorite from this restaurant nearby. It's chicken and bacon mac and cheese. You're welcome. And it's National Dessert Day, so there are cookies plated out and about.
Very kind.
All right, and thank you again, Francis, for the lunch sponsorship. That was awesome. Yeah. Feeding our bodies as well as our souls. So Dan, would you?
Sure. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. God of grace, we give you thanks for the shared mission and commandment that you gave us to love one another. And we do that in a plethora of ways and through many different missions and values that we have. Be with us today, this morning, as you have been. Bless our conversation, bless our meal together, as we give you thanks for all that you give to us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I'm going to stay for this one, then I'm going to zip over to the conference.
Yes. How was it yesterday?
You know what? I did not get to
Didn't
go.
make it?
I did not make it because I had something planned, and then I had to pick my son up, and I was like, I can't go play
And
all
it
that.
didn't switch till the afternoon, right?
Yeah.
Because I had, thank you, Lori.
I have a friend who's presenting this afternoon, so I want to.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah, I had coffee yesterday with a couple of my former coworkers, and the one was going to give me some.
It is.
If you meet anyone